Today we're prepping an Alexa Mini LF to roll on a techno crane, and the camera wasn't the only thing spinning. But first, I'd like to mention that I added some links to the stuff we shot on the cameras built in previous videos, so check the descriptions on those. To get started, I'm screwing a wooden camera unified bridge plate to the bottom of the Movcam roll rig. The roll rig is a device specifically made for rolling an Alexa Mini, but it fits the Mini LF too if you don't use the side brackets. To mount the camera on the roll rig, we need to attach the top and bottom plates. The plates use the same M3 attachment points as the ARRI Mini adapter plates, and to my knowledge the top and bottom plates are interchangeable. The roll rig isn't really my favorite thing in the world because it requires the body to be absolutely stripped, which makes it pretty much impossible to go from, for example, handheld to the roll rig during the day. This isn't a problem when you can afford a separate body for the roll rig, but at that point you could just use the money on a more expensive rolling solution that allows quick swaps between modes. The reason we're using the roll rig today is because we need to utilize the tracking on a techno crane and roll the camera. The Super Techno 30 has the Techno Head S, which is able to roll, but the 30-foot crane is too large for this studio. The Techno Crane 22, that is the right size for the space, only has the 2-axis LT head, so we need to add the roll axis. When the top and bottom plates are on, the camera can be mounted on the rig, using 3 M3 bolts per side. It doesn't matter which way you mount the camera, but pay attention to the rod adapters in the front. There are 2 rod adapters in the kit, but we only wanted the rods to be on top of the lens. I failed to notice this and mounted the camera so that the rods are on the bottom. To fix this, the camera has to be flipped or the rod adapters moved. I assumed it would be easier to move the rod adapters, but I was quite wrong, as they were held on by like a gazillion screws. Yep, it's taking a while. After the rod mount fiasco is dealt with, it's time to figure out how to mount the accessories. We're not using a monitor or a viewfinder on the body, and the wireless video transmitter is hooked up to the Technocrane pan bar output, so we don't have a lot to worry about. We don't want anything on the sides of the camera, so I'm using a small rig cheese plate with a rail block to mount the RIA1. The roll rig blocks the L-bus connector on the PL mount, and without it, the camera can't act as the motor controller. The RF motor can be used as a controller, but I've recently had problems using it with the Cam X connection. I was often facing a bug where the high 5 was always showing the recording state as recording, and another one where the motors stayed in encoder mode even though they had a connection to the handset. I first thought that I had a grounding issue with my RF motor and even had the connectors replaced, but a colleague told me that they had the same problem. So I decided to start using the RIA when I can't use the L-bus connection, and I haven't had problems since. The focus gears on the Leica R lenses we're using are so close to the mount that I have to use the C-Motion motor bracket extension to mount the motor close enough to reach them. We couldn't find a short enough 19mm rod to fit here and not be in the shot with a 12mm lens, so I had to use a 15mm rod with an adapter. To mount the focus bug, I'm using a small rig threaded rod and a mini magic arm. It honestly took me an hour to figure out how to do this without the sensor being in the frame, and I considered ditching it multiple times. Once we were doing freestyle shots with the Techno, I was super happy to have it though, especially when approaching actors in the dark and having the lights turn on during the take. With the roll rig, it's very important to route the cables inside the rig so they don't catch on anything. The motor bracket extension has a nice hole for the cables to go through, and after that they need to go between the roll rig and the camera body. Even though the RIA is a bit bulky, it does remove the need for the L-cube to interpret the serial data from the rangefinder. The RIA is connected to the body with a Cam X cable, which I unfortunately forgot to shoot. After wiring the basic accessories, it's time to figure out how to control the roll axis. A normal focus motor can be used to turn the roll rig using the gears, and there is a rod for mounting the motor on top of the rig. However, it's important to make sure the motor used to turn the rig has enough torque. The ARRI C-Force mini motors don't stand a chance here, and even the Plus motors often struggle. The Preston motors work well, but we're using an older ARRI CLM3 motor, which is plenty strong. The CLM motors aren't compatible with the L-bus system though, so they will be hooked up to a UMC4 motor controller that will be rigged on the Technocrane head. We'll use a high-5 to connect to the RIA to control the focus, and a WCU4 to connect to the UMC to control the roll. After checking that there's enough clearance to do a 360 and mounting the CLM motor, we have to pay some attention to the cables. We want to have all of the cables leaving the body in one static point even when the body is rolling. To achieve this, my grip bro Anton came up with this ingenious idea. We're using his custom 19mm to 5/8 adapter to connect to the LA Rag House 5/8 rigging parts. With a coupler corner and a cross part, we can make a centered point for the cables to pass through behind the camera. For the prep, I'm just powering the camera using a floor battery, as the camera will be powered by the Technocrane while shooting. At this point, it's time to mount one of the Leica R lenses rehoused by White Point Optics in Helsinki. This is, however, easier said than done, as the roll rig really blocks the PL mount wings on the Alexa. Luckily, my fingers are tiny and I'm just barely able to reach the wings to tighten the mount. I'm not sure if this would be easier if I move the wings to another position on the mount, but in any case, someone with bigger fingers will struggle with this for sure. After making sure everything is tight enough, I make a final check that the camera is able to rotate fully. We do want to use some filters on this, the black satin to be exact, but I'm feeling a bit iffy about having a matte box rotate with the camera. I tried using the Bright Tangerine Misfit Atom, but that actually dropped the filter when the camera was pointing straight down on the Techno. The LMB 4x5 standalone filter stage with the clamp adapter did the job, even though it was looking a bit funky as it couldn't be mounted straight on the lens. The final step in the build was testing the CLM motor. I powered on the UMC with an RS cable and started the calibration with the lock disengaged on the roll rig. I engaged the lock after a 180-degree roll, so the motor reads that position as a hard stop on a lens. I then released the lock to let the motor start moving towards the other hard stop and engaged it again after another 180-degree turn back. This calibrates the motor to move between these 2 points, achieving level horizons in the end positions. I didn't have a second AC on this job, but I was lucky to have a friend in the light department who I was able to manipulate into controlling the roll axis. We were doing a shot where we wanted to roll with a dancer doing a cartwheel, and he absolutely nailed it. I'll try to update the description of this video with a link if I'm able to find the result of this shoot at a later point. Special thanks to my grip bro Anton for coming up with 90% of the stuff described in this video. And thank you for watching. See you on the next one.